I like to start off these interviews, some of you may or may not know, by talking about me. So, Wally, I was in Our Late Night, a play you wrote. Was that your first play?
No.
We'll get into that then. But, Wally, there were 7 people on a big white couch. And as I remember, I played the part of Kristen. I was dressed in a Halston gown with much jewelry. Now, Wally, let me ask you, what did you think of my performance? Okay.
No, the incredible thing, this is true, Karen had an overwhelming influence on that play because she sort of led us into knowing how to do the play.
Really?
She came in late. I mean, somebody else had been playing the part. They left Andre Gregory's company. Karen came into the company, and we'd been rehearsing for years.
Wow.
And she almost didn't know why the play was so difficult and puzzling. She came in with a kind of confidence, and within only a matter of months, we were able to do the play.
I mean, we were, and also this was a company. You had been together for what, about 5 or 6 or 7 years together, working together.
Well, that company had been
That
together,
company.
yes. We were working on the play for
Right.
2 years.
Wow, right, wow. And Deborah, you are a short story writer. You did write a play called Pastoral. We'll get to that later. But I know you, aside from Wally, because I read your wonderful short story called Days about a woman who's desperately trying to give up smoking and ends up running at the Y. And I read it out loud at the Public Theater, and Kathleen Tolan directed me. And what she said to me was, each word that you say, you have to discover it as you say it. That's Deborah. And it worked. It worked.
It's amazing that you could do it. I mean, who can do that?
Thank you. Now, back to you.
I have one thing to add. Karen Ludwig in the Halston dress was a vision. It was a bright fuchsia dress. It was so gorgeous.
My hair was pulled back. And it was, and Richard Avedon took pictures, and
Yes.
I cannot find any of them. Anyway, it was a fantastic experience, and I later directed Our Late Night when I lived in LA at the Powerhouse, and you saw it.
Absolutely.
Oh, it's a fantastic play. We should do it again with all the old people.
A great idea.
Here's what I'm going to ask both of you. What do you wish you knew then that you know now?
In a way, I feel that I knew more then than I do now. Or at least I had more opinions then than I do now. And I'm very glad to shed the opinions. I suppose you could say that that's actually knowing things. I think it's very hard to be young, and I really don't know how to address that question except to say it's great to be older in most ways, in my opinion, and it's easier to learn things, it's easier to understand things, it's easier to value the people that you're working with. And I wish that I had had some of those capacities, more of them when I was young, which I remember as a time of terror, tension, anxiety, anguish.
I have that now.
Well, so do I.
But in a different way.
Different way.
Right.
So that was a kind of superficial answer, and now we'll get maybe the serious one.
Boy.
I mean,
I don't know. I don't, what do I wish I had known then? I can't picture myself as being different then from the way I was. I mean, probably when I first met you, I would have been, I mean, I was, I don't know, more complacent, I suppose. You know, I didn't really, when I met you, I didn't quite understand my own part in the great drama of the planet as a member of the upper class, the privileged beneficiary of oppression. I didn't really, I was worried about how I was going to crawl through the next few days rather than having any awareness that I myself was privileged and had been very lucky, and that poor people were being beaten down all over the world in order to sustain my lifestyle. It didn't really form a part of my thinking.
was that,
But I don't know if I wish I had been aware of those things at that time, and probably I might have done better things. I might have been out in the street demonstrating instead
or been a
of...
diplomat, as I read you may wanted to be?
Well, I did when I was the age of some of the people here, I did want to be maybe a diplomat or a civil servant.
Was The Fever your first play
No, my first play is one that...
when you were at Oxford?
I was a student at Oxford. I wrote it in 1967. So an entire, I don't know, 5 or 6 years before we met, which seemed at that time a lot of time.
Yes, we can all say that it seems then like it was a lot of time. And now it seems like, whoosh.
Yeah, I mean, you don't know what we're talking about,
Yes, some of them do.
but it's a,
Do you, may I interrupt?
please.
Do you remember that moment at Oxford where you wrote a play and said, this is what I want to do?
Yes, I actually did have that moment. I mean, I did. When I finished the play,
Yeah.
I thought, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life.
Not be an actor?
No, that never occurred to me.
And how did that come about?
That came about because well, I had studied down the block for a year in 1970. I'd already been writing plays, and I thought it was something people said at that time, they probably still do, if you write plays, you should study acting. So I went to the HB studio, and I said to the person in the office, I don't want to be an actor, but I would like to study here. And the person in the office said, you don't want to really be an actor, but you want to study here. Well, we have a perfect plan for you. Go down into the basement, and we have the perfect teacher for you. And the HB studio, I don't know if it's still true, but it had the amazing feature that you could start any time. You could start the day you arrived, and you didn't need to start at the beginning of a term. There were no terms. It was eternal. And you just tried to understand. It took a long time to understand what in the world people were talking about, but eventually you would catch on or you didn't. And I studied there for 9 months or so. I studied everything. Voice, movement, acting techniques, whatever. And then I forgot about it. And then every summer, Andre Gregory had a workshop at NYU.
That's where I met you.
Yes. And Ellie Renfield was in the
you two,
workshop.
I think, did a scene together.
We did a
What's
scene.
the scene? Sign in Sidney Brustein's window. The two of you did a scene.
We did.
And I did a scene with Saskia Nordic Hecht from, oh, God, isn't that awful? Not Ibsen, Hedda Gabler.
Wow.
I did a scene from Hedda Gabler, and Andre, this is when I first met Andre Gregory, and Andre said, "What's the worst moment you've ever had in your life?" And I said, "It's when I was photographing insane people in an insane asylum, and I had the camera in front of me, and I couldn't hold it steady because I was so horrified at what I was seeing." And he said, "Now say the lines." And it was the first teacher that ever did that to me. I was remembering these poor people locked up as I was saying Hedda's lines.
Wow.
And that's when he said, "Join the company." That's when I met you.
Wow.
But your work with Andre, in any way that you can expand upon that, I would be very interested in knowing how the two of you and why the two of you were able to.
Well, I was already writing for the company as a writer. That's why I was put into that. And then so every summer I would sort of be a student of the company. And then in around 77, Deborah and I were having dinner with the great and beloved Wilfrid Leach, who probably nobody here has ever heard of. He was a director, an early AIDS victim. He died in the 80s. But he was a kind of guru of mine. And the three of us were having dinner, and he said, "Well, I want you to be in a play that we're doing." It was my own text, a translation of The Mandrake of Machiavelli. And I said, "Well, I'm not an actor. How could I be in the play? I think I'm going to become a taxi driver," because at that time I had absolutely no idea how I was going to make any kind of a living, or even in a way grasp that it was a problem fully, because I borrowed from friends. And Deborah said, "Well, you must take the acting job. I don't want you to be a taxi driver because you can't drive."
Was that, okay. Now, first of all, I want to say, Deborah, you've acted. You've acted in Wally's plays. Before that, you had not acted.
No.
Right.
No, not at all.
What did that give you, if anything, in terms of being a writer?
You know, I'm not at all sure that it gave me anything in terms of being a writer. Now, my life, it gave me plenty. And I mean, it was one of the huge experiences of my life. And it came about, I was in the same play of Wallace's twice. Once we did it first in 2000.
Designated Mourner?
Designated Mourner, The Designated Mourner. It's a phenomenal play. And it is. And then again, last summer, 2013. And it was quite a different experience each time, but it was a huge experience. And I am not an actor, and certainly not trained, except insofar as I rehearsed for many years, as Andre does. We worked on The Designated Mourner for a long time, and at first, I can't begin to tell you how bad I was. I mean, I was terrible, and I had no idea how to, and I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked to discover how awful I was. And not that I expect to be good at things,
But you hadn't studied acting?
no. And,
How did you know you were so bad?
oh, there was no mistaking it.
Well, I mean, would Wally, let me ask you this, would Wally give you it's his words, it's his play, would he every once in a while say, now I think this is the way it should be done?
No, the problem was not line reading. I understood the play perfectly.
Right.
And I had made a very, very, very big mistake, which if I get boring, I just put the little cloth over my...
You?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was the line in the play.
No. No, that was an interjection. But I have found that actors are extremely good readers. That is, they know what they're reading. Actors are very good at reading fiction, for example, which is what I write. Good at reading complicated fiction. At least good actors are. I thought, this is so stupid, you won't believe it, but I thought, well, I understand this play, every nuance of it, I understand it. Therefore, I will be able to perform it. And of course, that turns out not to be true at all. It's a one-way street. And so it took me a very, very, very long time to learn how actually, well, to act. And it was a big experience.
That's very interesting. When you were working with Andre, did you improvise a lot? Did you improvise the words?
Oh, no, never.
You never improvised?
Never.
I don't think we ever did.
What
no.
you wrote, no.
We improvised the situation.
Okay.
As you did with, I mean, the camera and the worst experience. Well, maybe, Wally, you should talk about the way we worked on it.
Well, we had a lot
initially.
of different, we did something that was, in a way, akin to improvisation, in that he would say, all right, or we would collectively say,
Yes.
because we sort of, Andre doesn't particularly like to be the guy who contributes the ideas.
But he does laugh.
We would collectively decide, okay, let's imagine that we are at a sort of tribunal, like the Nuremberg tribunal after World War II, and we are testifying to a jury that is going to decide our fate.
Or let's imagine that we're at a dinner party and there's a lot of conflict between the people and we're trying to be polite and not succeeding very well. Or...
Yeah, I mean, for instance, I didn't remember this, but when Deborah said that, I remember we did get a bunch of people together and a bunch of food, and we did sit at a table and have dinner and do the play. Maybe many times. That was like a phase of the rehearsal. So Yeah, it was like improvisation, but we never
Changed the
never
words.
changed the words.
Right, right. I'm just thinking when David Hyde Pierce came, he talked about when he did The Cherry Orchard with Peter Brook. They had one of the first rehearsal was a huge banquet with vodka. And they sat around and had a huge dinner. And then that was in them,
Yeah.
in a way.
Yeah.
And with Andre's company, too, the process of working with Andre's company. I remember when we did The Seagull, I think we improvised every scene that Chekhov had not written.
Wow, yes.
But then our problem became, as you remember, now what do we do when we have to say the words he did write? There's that. Anyway. Wally, I'm going to read this because you seem to get us to identify and then reveal our fear, our selfishness, our hypocrisy, our lack of real knowledge of the world. Would you say that's what you hope to do as a playwright? For instance, in The Fever, you came to my apartment. I think I was one of the first people you performed it for in a regular home, somebody's home, where I invited friends.
Yes.
And it was you standing there in that room, spewing forth your vitriolic, no, is that the right word,
Perfect.
Deborah? Fury and everything. And we sat there like this, and my stupid ex-brother-in-law said, as we were eating downstairs afterwards, well, I don't understand what that was about. I mean, if people earn money, they should be able to spend it in the way that they should. I mean, your play really got to him. You awakened this defense in him about how if you've worked for money, then by God, you don't have to think about the poor people.
Well, these people don't know what I mean, this is a play, it's a one-person play,
Yeah.
and it's about a traveler in a poor country who comes from a wealthy country, a vaguely privileged person who is traveling in a poor country and gets sick. And because he's sick, he begins to have some insight into the way that he is connected to those poor people that he's surrounded by in that country, and.
Wasn't there a revolution going on of some sort? Or
Well, he's in a poor country that is where there are some rebels who are fighting against the government, and he sort of pieces it all together in a way that it sounds boring, but it's actually quite interesting if it's done the right way.
It is.
But it is a long monologue.
It's a long monologue, and let me just interject here. When you're rehearsing your words that you wrote as a monologue, it's just you. At home, alone, does she listen to you? I mean, do you have an audience? I mean, do you go into a tape recorder? How do you rehearse alone?
Well, I made the mistake of doing that play without a director and without really a rehearsal process, if you want to look at it that way. I mean, I began by doing it at people's apartments, including Karen's apartment, for 12 people at a time. And I sort of spent about a year going from one person's apartment to the next, doing this 1 hour and 3/4 long performance. And I would come before I did it and set up chairs and figure out how the room was going to be arranged. And people knew they were coming to see a play. I mean, it was not, we didn't just spring this on them. And for that, it wasn't a problem really that I hadn't rehearsed and that there was no director. But then I started doing it in theaters, and well, if you're asking, what do I know now that I didn't know then? Yes, I know I should never have done that play for more than 12 people without a director,
Right.
because as Karen remembers it, even with the 12 people, I was haranguing them, but it wasn't really a problem. For a larger audience, I performed it much too militantly and angrily, and without much variety. It was rather chaotic as a performance. And
Your connection with the audience is absolutely terrific. It's unlike anybody I've ever known, even in my little apartment. But I mean, when you're talking to the audience, as you do quite a bit, because a lot of your writing is monologues, your connection with the audience, are you really talking to this particular audience now, let's say, these people, or is there an audience in your head that you're talking to?
well, when I did The Fever, it was so intense that I thought it was rude to literally direct the lines to individuals. So I didn't. I looked at people's shoulders.
I see.
Obviously, from there, you don't really know whether I'm looking at a person or whether I'm looking at their shoulder. But when we did The Designated Mourner, certainly this last summer, I think we both were actually looking at individuals and speaking to them.
And we could see them.
Yes. That's
The house was lit. We
Just
could-
like this. We saw them and we talked to them.
Oh, you make a statement I wrote down, I hope I kept it. Theater, this may have been a while, theater almost always asks people to try to believe something that isn't true. And each person has his own list of things he finds particularly hard or easy to believe. For whatever reason, I find it very easy to believe that an actor is speaking spontaneously when actually he's memorized a text. But I find it very difficult to believe that I'm looking at a bedroom when I know I'm looking at a stage. So for me, the safest way to begin a play as a writer is with someone speaking to an audience. I think that's so interesting.
I couldn't put it better.
And then, well, first I'm going to ask you about a couple of things. My dinner with Andre, the two of you talking for hours, and then they filmed it. How did that come about? Did you just sit down with Andre at a restaurant one day and start talking about things, and then he joined you, and then you said, hey, this would make a good play? Or
Well, this is a movie, My Dinner with Andre, directed by Louis Malle. And it came about because Andre did the play that Karen was in, Our Late Night, and then he spent a period of maybe 3 years when he was not working in theater, and he was sort of going through internal turmoil and seeking I don't know, a better way to live and a better way to see himself, whatever. And he traveled, went to different places, and he visited Grotowski, whom he'd already known, and he went walked through the Sahara Desert with Jerry Baman and other people. If you know that actor, Jerry Baman, who was in our company. And every once in a while he'd come back, and occasionally we would speak or see each other, and he would tell me about these things he was doing, and I didn't understand really why he was doing those things. And so then he said, well, now I'm back, I've stopped doing all those things, and I would like to go back and work in theater or whatever. And I said, well, why don't we make a movie in which it would be you and me talking, and you'll tell about some of the things that you've done, and I will react, in the way that I actually do react. I mean, that was the germ of the idea. And I said, that it would be funny because we had very contrasting views of life. And then, so we got a grant. At that time, there was more money for things, and public television, instead of, reflecting corporate interests, was actually run by rather far out, amazing people. And we got a grant and to transcribe our tape-recorded conversations. So we started meeting every few days, and for several months, we met and talked about anything. Not just about that, but about all of life. And it was quite fun because I am usually rather busy, or I don't have endlessly long conversations with friends, particularly. So it was quite a fun thing to do. And then this grant paid people to transcribe these tape-recorded conversations, and it was an enormous stack of, in a way, meaningless conversation. But then it became clear that it had to be turned into interesting characters rather than being a documentary-style representation of the real people. We made ourselves, I was aware of the fact that the people had to be interesting as characters to someone who would walk in and never have heard of us or have no interest in us. And it had to have a story, in a way. It had to have a beginning and a middle and an end.
Did you edit? Were you the editor, or did you, or did Louis Malle?
Well, it wasn't an editing. It was really writing. I mean, it took a couple of years to write that script.
And it was scripted. When you did it, it was scripted. You were not improvising.
No, we didn't improvise anything. It was memorized and recited, although I kept in many confusions and awkwardnesses and misunderstandings, the way people really speak. So once we'd memorized that, including, did you, no, I said, I walked the dog, not I walked the door. We kept in those things.
So, and they seemed as if you didn't know what the next person was going to say.
Right, we memorized it and we acted it.
Yes, but that is one of the hardest, that is the genius. I mean, that's one of the hardest things to do. Once you know, and especially when they're your own words, to pretend as if you don't know what that next guy's going to say. How did you do that, Wally?
Well, we rehearsed for a very long time. We rehearsed for many months.
Was there somebody directing you?
Yes, Louis Malle directed
he was
us.
not just on the camera. He was there.
He joined in more or less as soon as the script was finished. We started rehearsing it. And he got the finished script.
Yeah.
But then we cut it down while we rehearsed.
Do you like being on camera? let's say, more than being in the theater, or it's obviously different, but do you have a preference, or is it?
Well, for me personally, I don't really enjoy I'm sure I see some grown-ups in here who may even teach in fields that would particularly make them wish I wasn't saying what I'm saying. But I don't really enjoy, personally, the process of delivering the performance to a distant audience, which is one of the great skills that people who study acting learn, and that's a wonderful thing. And I mean, I'm not criticizing it, I'm saying I personally don't enjoy that process of being sure that the people in row LL can hear me or understand what I'm doing, or that is not enjoyable for me.
Are you not enjoying this?
Well, even this would be easier in a way if we had little microphones, because I like to speak very quietly and have everybody hear me. I mean, this is a kind of insanity if you want to look at it that way. Everybody would like to, wiggle their fingers and have a hamburger magically appear. I would like to speak very quietly and have everybody hear me. This is a kind of delusion of grandeur, but I'm admitting it since you asked the question. So for me, it's most fun to perform for a very, very small audience or to be in the movie.
I'm going to go to you now, Deborah.
What?
Deborah, you wrote Pastoral, your first play.
My first and only.
And only. Why no more plays, Deborah?
I'm just not a playwright, I feel. That was a mistake.
But it was a very, very good mistake. I saw it, I'll never forget it. These were kids all together living in, I think, Melanie's house in Woodstock.
Somewhere.
People dropping in, dropping out, smoking dope, drinking, and talking about love, sex, and epistemology.
Yes, epistemology as well. Yes, I don't mean that it was a mistake insofar as it was, I wish I hadn't done it. I'm really glad I did it. But I mean, it was a mistake in that it was an accident. It was an accident. And it was an accident that never happened again. But it came directly out of your reading of Days,
Really?
Absolutely.
Oh.
It came directly out of that.
Why wasn't I in the play then?
Well, why weren't you?
No, I think they
you
were
would have
all
been
younger
great.
or something.
They were very young, and time had actually passed because it was a long time between writing that story, you're performing that story, and writing the play.
I think Carol Rothman directed it.
Eventually, I mean, it sat in a drawer for a long time, and then it found its way to Carol. But it was Joe Papp saw your reading, and maybe a year and a half later, he called me and he said, well, why don't you write a play? And I said, well, why would I? And I'd only written that one story, and I hadn't any plans for going ahead writing.
Really?
Yeah, no.
Not even short stories? You had
No.
plans.
I mean,
When did you know that you could do that? When did you?
After I wrote the play. And if I had not written the play, I would not have kept writing.
What would you have been doing?
Lying in a gutter somewhere. I mean, that was what I planned to do.
I somehow do not see you lying in a gutter.
Well, that was my plan. So
Wow. Let me ask you, when you first decide to sit down, either one of you, and write a draft or write something, what is it that you need? I mean, do you need a hamburger? Or do you need certain things in place? Do you need to know the ending of a story or a play?
I'm going to go back just one. Pastoral by Deborah is a great play.
Oh, thank you, John.
And
Funny.
I think it's
Should be done.
tragic that she hasn't written more plays. And I think the mistake was not writing more plays, and I think maybe one day Deborah will write more plays, but I can't let this just sit here as if
Yes.
this is not an incredible play. There are, I think, personal reasons why she didn't pursue that particular thing. I don't know. I don't have I mean, as far as my answer to your question, what I need, I can't really answer it except to say I have often benefited in writing from being in a far away or unfamiliar place, and an awful lot of what I've written has been first written in hotel rooms, not
in your study of your apartment.
right.
Right.
I mean, I write plays over a course of years, but I do sort of remember, in many cases, where I was when I first wrote the first draft of a certain moment or passage or something like that, and there are a lot of hotel rooms in there.
We did a play of yours called, was it the Hotel Play? What was it called?
The hotel play?
The Hotel Play? Do you remember that? We were all naked.
No,
No,
that was
that's
a
a
different
different
play.
What was the play we were naked? We were naked. Kathy, me, Jeff Horowitz, Ron Van Loo, we were all naked.
Well, Ron was not naked.
that's right.
That's why he is where he is. No, but
Ron was not naked.
was
I
the
mean,
name
just
of that play?
that was a play called. Well, let me put it this way: I've written a play called "A Thought in Three Parts," which is made up of three separate plays in a way, except they all fit together. And the one in there's. The longest of the three is called The Youth Hostel.
oh, the youth hostel.
And it was in that play that Karen was naked and that Ron was actually not naked.
But Jeffrey Horowitz.
Jeffrey Horowitz, whom you
He started theater for a new audience.
now a distinguished elder statesman, at that time, naked madman.
Here's another quote of yours, and then we're going to take questions from the audience. Writing is like trying to make gunpowder out of chemicals. You have these words and sentences and the strange meanings and associations that are attached to the words and sentences, and you're somehow cooking these things all up so that they suddenly explode and have a powerful effect. That's what absorbs me from day to day in writing a play. Isn't that good?
Did I say that?
Yes.
Where did you find these? These
I
are
looked
fabulous
at
quotes.
I know that's.
Do you
that's
perform for each other? Do you say, Deb, please sit down, I'm going to read you a piece from my work? Or do you say in writing your short stories, Wally, listen to this passage, do you think it works? No.
No.
Never.
Do you have to audition? Or do people hire you now?
Oh, no, I auditioned 2 weeks ago and was I guess, brutally rejected. They haven't called me.
Do you like auditioning, or is it painful?
No.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Is there anything that you can share to our actors who have to audition all the time? Is there anything you've learned that you might...
I almost never get the part if I audition, so I clearly don't have anything to offer. I mean, I used to always get the part when I auditioned the very first couple of years that I auditioned, because I didn't care. They knew that I just thought it was a joke. And I didn't care if I got the part. I wasn't making a living as an actor. I was just goofing around with this funny idea that was an alternative to being a taxi driver. I was enjoying it. It was just a joke. I didn't plan to be an actor. I think it was more or less when I began to realize that I could make a living as an actor that, and that I actually therefore wanted these parts, that my batting average, as you might say, went down. Now, I really want the part. I have debts. I'm eager to earn the income, and it's been years since I've actually gotten a part that I auditioned for. The parts that I've ever gotten are when people call me.
Yes, you don't need to, yeah.
Yes, I mean, sometimes
What,
people call me.
what piece of conventional wisdom about playwriting have you found the least helpful? And you as a writer as well, if so. You teach as well.
I do.
Do you teach at Columbia?
I do teach at Columbia.
MFA?
MFA.
Playwriting? I mean writing.
Writing.
Right.
Fiction
well,
writing.
what piece do you think is least helpful that you...
Oh,
or.
any piece. I mean, absolutely any piece. I think probably playwriting is quite different from writing fiction, but really there are only a few elements that are involved in writing fiction. That's how well you can use the English language and your soul. And
Just that.
that's about it, and how hard you're going to work, how patient you can be. And all the kinds of advice that I've heard, like never put a dream in a piece of fiction, I couldn't get through a piece of fiction, writing one, without a dream in it. Or I've heard, well, you shouldn't have a cookie.
A cookie?
A cookie. Always have cookies. A short story has to have a certain shape with a climax. It's really, I mean, when you said earlier, Karen, that you brought up the matter of how do you say things for the first time after you've rehearsed and it's a written text. Well, to me, that's the magic that actors can do. It's complete magic. And it is, to me, the task. And to me, there's an analogous task with writing, which is how do you convey an experience as if it were just creating itself from the piece of paper right in front of you at that moment, a sort of emotional experience that's never, ever been experienced before. Everything from first principles, and all advice runs counter to that. So that's what I would say.
How do you know when a piece is finished?
A lot of people ask that.
Oh, then I don't want to ask.
No, you can, I mean, it's a good question because nobody knows the answer, or nobody can answer it. But I think when you can almost always do more than you think that you can do. You think you've come to the end. You think, I cannot make this any better. I cannot make it more real. I cannot make it more alive. I can't solve the problems. You probably can. And you just have to be very, very, very patient. But then, at a certain point, there's nothing you can do that'll make it better, and that's when you're finished.
Do you have anything to add? Otherwise, I have two more eensy-beensy questions, and then I want to open it up.
I don't have anything to add. I mean, principles of playwriting, no.
Oh God, I forgot what I was going to say now. But one of them is, what aspect of your life, you may have already answered this, to your surprise, both of you, has become more accessible? And the other question I was going to ask, now I remember, is what do you do to keep yourself going in between stories, jobs? What do you do to keep yourself? Are there one of those you may address? Or none?
I've already forgotten the first one.
I did too. What aspect of yourself has, to your surprise, become more accessible?
I'm going to go for the second one. I myself am an extremely slow writer, and I've always, up until quite recently, written in my very, very, very slow way, very steadily. And a couple of years ago, I hit a kind of impasse, and nothing that I can do seems satisfactory. And also, I feel my relationship to writing or writing fiction has changed in some way that I don't yet understand. And so I'm really nowhere. I'm stuck. I'm just, for the first time in many decades, I'm not writing. So Karen's question is very applicable to me. And I find that the task is to force myself back on just experiencing my life, which of course is not so easy to do. It's the anxiety of writing is just horrible. It's just, it's much more fun to act. But the anxiety of writing is really, really awful. I'm not experiencing that particularly, but I'm experiencing the anxiety of, the second hand moving along, the loud clicking of the ticking of the clock, my hair turning white. And so the task becomes how to be a human being.
In the time we have left.
Yeah. It's very
That's a good
interesting.
one. Oh, yeah.
You mean how to be a human being in the time we have left, but also before possibly returning to writing, not to spend that non-writing time as a blank blob.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Which is, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say this, possible. I mean, one can become a kind of nothing where you're not taking in anything and you're not experiencing anything, and that's sad, but it's possible. I don't have the same issue because I do two different things which I would recommend to people. Certainly I would, I am, and I also have a very, very, very forgiving attitude toward myself about writing. I don't, my demands on myself are very, very low. I take it as totally normal that if I finished a play, I would take at least 2 years off before even thinking about getting to work on another play. But also, I just don't have a very high standard for how much I'm supposed to write. I mean, my most recent play maybe just took me 2 or 3 years, let's say, and I didn't work on it that much. The previous one I worked on much more, and it took 10 years, but I don't really care in a way, because I don't care. And then I also work as an actor, and I make a living as an actor, if I make any living, because I gave up on making a living as a writer before I ever even thought of the question, almost. It was obvious that that was impossible. So, because my plays were too bizarre. I think about, acting, and I have a lot of errands to do. So, mostly I think about them, really.